Hi, my name is Laurie Wolf. I'm a certified global business professional and a distinguished fellow with NASBITE International. We're a professional organization that is aimed at improving the practice of international business and global trade. And I'm really happy to be here to talk with you about exporting, and especially about why now might be the right time to expand your exports. I know it seems a bit odd in the middle of a pandemic that I would say that, but it really truly is a good time to be looking at some of those foreign opportunities for your company. So our session today, first we'll talk about why, and then we're going to talk about getting help. The government puts a lot of assistance into programs to help companies export, and I want to make sure you know what's available and that this is something where you can have a lot of assistance identifying the best markets and topics and things for you. And so we will talk through some of the options and some of the things that you might want to consider. How do you find a good partner? One of the ways you do is come to trade shows like this. So what would normally happen is you'd be in the aisle and people would be walking by talking to you, but it's still going to be a great opportunity for you to get some potential leads and meet some companies. And then I especially want to focus on some lending opportunities because that's something many people aren't aware of, that can help them to actually expand plant and equipment if they can justify it with export. So exporting and in general business is a strategic decision. And so you need to be very thoughtful as you decide what markets you're going to enter and why you're entering them and when you're entering them. And so I just want to say it's part of a holistic package. Some very new to market companies get very distracted by the potential of all these people showing up and handing them their business cards. And it really needs to be something that you do deliberately and with care. Often it's haphazard. Sometimes that works out, but there really are processes and programs and things in place that are going to help you make this the most likely to be successful possible. And you do need to have, your basic production in place, your basic business in place, your basic distribution in place before you're going to think about exporting. And there are export readiness assessment tools. So if you go to trade.gov or some of the other sites I'm going to show you, there are test assessment tools that would help you decide if you're ready to start exporting. So why now? And what I can tell you is that the companies that are able to deploy resources during down times, the companies that are able to invest in capacity building, that are able to invest in relationships, that are able to use this time in a way that's productively building their business are the ones that do the best in the next upcycle. And especially because there's so much resources from government coming in to help business right now. And sometimes, especially the export ones, aren't being deployed because people aren't doing it so much. It really is an opportunity that you can take advantage. And that business that you actually start building right now might not happen for 6 months or a year. So if you get started on it now, by the time it actually utilizes and happens in business, it may be something that's farther and you're more ready and they're more ready for. So I always say, imports create jobs. Some of you import things and sell them. Imports create jobs just like exports do. But governments, for particular reasons, are particularly interested in exporting. That's what they pay a lot of attention to. So there's just a lot of extraordinary resources available at the federal, state, local levels for companies that want to export. So the U.S. government, through the Commerce Department, Commercial Services, has a tremendous amount of resources. At every embassy around the world, there's commercial services staff. Where there's not an embassy, there's commercial service reps, there's people in Washington, there's people in the States that are helping U.S. business to grow their business ties and their opportunities abroad. And those resources are available. If you're a food manufacturer, if you do something that is an ag commodity, you additionally have all the resources of the Agriculture Department. So depending on what your product is like, you may be able to double dip. You may be able to use ag resources and also commercial service resources to kind of grow your business. The SBA focuses on companies that employ 500 people or less, which my best guess is that's going to be the vast majority of the people that I meet at Global typically. And so the SBA also has programs that don't just help you grow your domestic business, but are geared toward export. And they've put particular emphasis in this pandemic recovery on sort of export assistance and creating new programs and projects. Throughout the country, there are these federally sponsored entities called small business development centers. There's also ones for women and minority groups and veterans, so they might have a different name sometimes depending on the population. But the typical name is SBDC, so Small Business Development Center. And every SBDC has to have somebody who knows about trade. And some of them are designated sort of international trade specialists. So they can help you with business plans, they can help you with marketing ideas, they can help you with all kinds of things, but they are also there to be export assistant counselors. Then states come in with their own resources. And my best guess is you are probably in a state that is putting resources into promoting exports. So some states have state networks of international trade centers. They sometimes have foreign trade offices in target markets. Sometimes the governor takes people on trade missions. And so, the economic development and the ag resources and the business resources in your state may also be helping you. Most states at this point have a no wrong door policy, that if you contact somebody at your state and they don't know how to help you with your export problem or your thing, they're supposed to be able to direct you to the right one. And so, you've got multiple places that you can kind of go and ask for assistance, but I would encourage you to reach out to somebody, because somebody will hook you up with who ultimately can help you the most. There's also business associations. And so DECs are district export councils, and we'll talk about them in a minute, but that's an example. Sometimes your chambers of commerce, sometimes other business development agencies will have things. Oftentimes trade associations like APA will come up with sort of export councils and things to help people. So that's also a possibility. And then there are commercial providers. So there are people who you pay money and they will give you data and they will help you to do trade. And sometimes you can get some of that data through your state resources without having to pay the commercial provider. So I would just let you know that that's an option also. So where would you start? So my suggestion is, if you're already an exporter, and especially if you're already exporting 1-2 million plus a year, you're going to go to the nearest U.S. Export Assistance Center. If you are new to export, you haven't done a lot of exporting, you're not at that level yet, then maybe those SBDCs or those international trade centers in your state are the best store for you to open, or reaching out to the Small Business Administration. But if you get a major order, you have this really potential product, it's not going to be wrong to go to the U.S. Export Assistance Center, and they can help direct you. They're going to be very coordinated with the people in your state. So I just had experience with the person in Maryland who works with pet firms in Maryland. So he's a commercial service officer, and he is, one of his industries that he's responsible for is the pet industry. And so he was very quick. It was a new to export company. He was offering all kinds of assistance. So he was definitely reaching out and working with her on the problems that she was having. But he was also quick to let her know that he was going to set up a meeting with the state people, and the state people were helping, to fund some of the federal programs. So again, I just want to encourage you to get started with somebody, because they will actually then get you to that next step, and the person who probably can help you the most. So depending on where you live, that might be a state international trade center. That might be an SBDC that's been designated for international trade, but get going with somebody. And again, if you're an ag person, there may be ag programs in their state that have more resources, then that might be the place, and that they're helping you to develop products and opportunities. And again, peers. So peers in the industry, if they're not your direct competitor, so you're selling dog food, they're selling dog food, you may not want to talk to them about your successful exports. But if they're selling cat litter, maybe they'll help you. So if you talk to people, I find people in the industry to be friendly, and if they're having success in a market or they've seen drawbacks in a market, they're often willing to share that information. So I'd encourage you to reach out to other people in the industry too. So the kinds of things that you could get from the federal government are from initial market checks of what would be the best markets, that they'll actually come and say to you, we think these are the top 5 markets for you to explore, and here's why. And a lot of that is free. You get a buyer who, does an inquiry with you, and you don't know if they're legit or not, and you want to check that out. You can often do that for free. They'll have the commercial service rep in the place, check them out, do pretty low level, but checking out sort of viability of, is that a business? 2, literally, they will host you in markets. They will set you up with meetings, one-on-one meetings with, people who have been vetted and are what they consider to be the best potential partners for you in that market. And that's called the Gold Key program. And at this moment, that's virtual. They're not hosting people in country, but what would normally happen is you pay this fee for the Gold Key program, which is as low as $900. So literally as low as $900 for a small business, goes up to a couple $1,000s, I think, for a very large enterprise. And you've decided that the right market for you to enter is Germany. They would host you in Germany. They would set you up with the German companies. If you needed help with translators, which you probably wouldn't there, but if you needed help with translators, they would arrange for that. You are responsible for your travel costs, etc. But you basically have these one-on-one, vetted meetings with people that have been set up by, basically the U.S. Embassy is really trying to be your face to kind of build your business abroad. So at the moment, that kind of stuff is happening virtually. So a lot of these trade missions, a lot of these partner introductions, you can do partner searches that are just for a partner in a market or multiple partners. You can have them do background checks on people. I'm going to post, so we all have profile pages. So if you click on my name and my profile page, I will post what they charge for these services. So I have the table and it says, what do these different things charge? They're not very expensive. And the kind of work that you would have to do it on your own would be a lot. And so this is something to consider and to be much more strategic about utilizing it. And as I said, as we talked to the commercial service officer in Maryland about, this was a dog food company, he said right now Maryland is paying for half of the expenses of 2 programs. So if you want to do a partner search, if you want to do a gold key, Maryland is paying half with some of their state money. So that's why you really have to get into this network, is because there's multiple opportunities that you can take advantage of. So it varies, and who you talk to and who you go to is going to depend on your state. So these are a couple, so Missouri has its own branding, and I teach it at a university that's in Illinois, and we have international trade centers and we have trade offices in some countries. Georgia is really up for exporting. And so that network, since the Jobs Act and the last financial crisis, has really been focused on, export ready and building exports. And the reason your federal partners, they don't charge you a lot for these programs, but they want you to be successful because that's how their success is measured. So their success is measured in how many jobs did they create, how much new, GDP did they generate in a period. So they are very focused on your success because that's how their success is measured, is you being successful. So again, I just want to mention, if you are a food, an ag product, so it could be a hay, it could be, it has to be an ag product, and they really like value-added ag for some programs, but any sort of dog food, cat food, any sort of treat, any sort of natural bedding that's an agricultural product, you are also going to be eligible for support through the Agriculture Department. And I wanted to mention a particular one because they're always at Global Pet Expo. And one of the things that I think people don't realize is there's always a trade mission that comes to Global Pet Expo that's international buyers. And this isn't just a buyer who said, oh, I think I'd like to go to Global, or I'd like to, go to the show. This is literally recruited to come directly to Global Pet Expo from these different international markets. And you're pre-qualifying them as buyers, and you're setting up one-on-one meetings with the companies that are exhibiting at Global to be able to meet with these potential buyers. And yes, those buyers are walking the floor too, but these are one-on-one meetings with people who have said, I have interest in these products. And you as a company pay a small fee, and I want to say it's like $250, but not more than that. And you get meetings with the ones that you would like to meet with. And they were from many different countries this time around. This time it's virtual. Those meetings are happening virtually, but in the past it's been physical. They bring them to Florida to the convention center, and those buyers should be kind of looked at as different than the other buyers who are walking the floor because they've been pre-qualified. So the government has pre-qualified them to say, hey, these are people that you would want to work with. So one of the resources that's usually at Global is Food Exports USA, and they actually are the blue and the red region on this map. But basically, if you were doing food exports, you were eligible for some funding for marketing and market development, which can include trade show expenses. And that's overseen. The grant comes out of the Ag Department and it goes to this block. So whichever one of the parts of the country you're in that block. So you're in that block. And then you come up with a plan and a budget for how you're going to use that money to support your marketing expenses in the foreign country. I think you can use it for website globalization right now because of, they've had to make some changes to some of their programs given the virtual nature of life at the moment. But literally half your expenses for going to an international trade show and Global can count for that. So it is something that you could get some of the money back that you're spending on a booth if there's enough of that international. So I would certainly consider looking into Food Exports USA. And again, it's got different names depending on the part of your country, but the basic program is called the Branded Program. And they do all kinds of training and resource development and market research for ag exports. And they do trade missions and virtual meetings, and they're a tremendous resource. Now, if you're not an ag-based product, you can't do their stuff, but you've got all the other ones that you can still do. So district export councils are basically seasoned exporters. So somebody who's a really excellent, long-standing leader in exports who partners with people in their region to help other people export. And so that it's quasi government funded. They get their funding from the federal government, but the people are actually private people, and they're people who are successful exporters, and they're counseling other exporters. And some of these decks are amazing, and they're super active, and they do all kinds of training, and they're the best resource you could find. So I would encourage you to look at what's in your area. What is in your area that you can take advantage of that's going to help you to grow your business. And sometimes they may not know PET, but they know a lot of the navigation that you need to know to manage sort of global trade and business. So how do you figure out the best market? So I'm writing an article for the show daily, and I have like 5 tips for like what would be the market you would want to look at. And basically the first thing anybody's going to say when you walk in and you talk to them is they're going to say, well, Canada and Mexico. So we have a free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. That's where most U.S. businesses do business. Canada's a robust pet market. And so those are markets that are initially ones that a lot of U.S. companies look at, is they're going to look at Canada and Mexico. So that's the first thing they're going to say. And then they're going to look industry by industry and country by country. And when they make these profiles, they look at what they think are the good industry, what are the good markets to go into in that country. Oops, sorry. Got to go back one. All right. So friendly trade policies. We have free trade agreements with 18 countries. If you want the list, you can go onto my profile, or you can look at my article on the show daily. So I'm not going to do all 18 of them here, but we have free trade agreements with 18 countries, which means no tariffs, which means to some degree streamlined, but not easy. One of them is Australia, and Australia is hard if it's an ag product in terms of getting permits and things. So they're not all equal in size. They're not all equal in levels of economic development, but what you know is they don't have tariffs, and they're interested in doing business with the United States. And so that would be a place that you might want to consider first, like easier versus harder. I always think easier, lower hanging fruit, best first opportunity versus doing something that's extremely difficult. So that would be. So who buys a lot of pet food? That data is out. Like, where are the top markets that are receiving pet food, or receiving, if you're doing grooming equipment, if you're doing other kinds of supplies, what markets are receiving that? So part of the data analysis that you can do yourself, and we can teach you to do yourself, but that you can, in essence, use your SBDCs and your other resources to do, is to look at that data of volumes of trade and where is trade going, and what are places that are already buying a lot of these products that I might fit well. All right, rapid growth. What markets are growing, what markets aren't? And so in general, Asia is going to have more rapid growth than Europe, for example. Europe has more of that humanization of pets, but there are high income people everywhere in the world. And so if you can find a big enough population of people that have the money to buy your product, you could probably sell in any market in the globe. So you do want legal protections. It's going to depend a little bit on your product, but if your brand and your technology and your things are something that you need to really be protected, you're going to want to make sure you pick markets where that's better supported than others. So that would be something to consider. You want to look at language, culture, expectations. You want to look at how does that match. So one of the requirements that's going to happen is probably that you have to have packaging that's in the home language, especially if it's food ingredients or if it's a supplement. They're going to make you have that local language that lists all the ingredients. And I don't have to tell you that packaging is expensive. So there are some ways to get around it with stickering and things like that, but that might be something. So if you already have spent the money to get your stuff into French or to get your stuff into Spanish, then where else do you want to go with that? So those are things that you might consider. This might be a little less relevant in pet as it might be in other industries, but sometimes we have old products that aren't as new and high tech and as cool and whatever as what's the newest thing in the market here. And sometimes those markets that are in earlier stages of development are going to be interested in those kinds of products. So I would look at your product lines, and I would see price points, and I would see things and say, well, maybe some of your stuff that's not as high a value added, that's a little bit cheaper, maybe that would fit better in one of these markets versus another. Maybe you can get new life for some of your brands that you're not, maybe seeing the traction for in the United States right now. And then I'd also be strategic. I think sometimes people pick markets because that's where the CEO and the owner want to go. I want to go there, and that's why we're going to go into that market. But I think you want to look at like where's the best place for you to build a footprint. And so if you're going to start in Singapore, if you're going to start in Taiwan, if you're going to start in South Korea, like what kind of markets are near there? What information are you learning about that? If you go into the EU, a lot of the barriers for the EU are all of the same, so that the kinds of ingredients and manufacturing processes that you have to go into the EU are going to be similar across all of the EU countries. And so maybe there's one that makes sense to get started with, and then you can build up from there. So that might be something to think about. So as I said, primary data can be expensive. I mean, you can subscribe to Compass and Dun & Bradstreet and all of these places that you can research companies and partners and things. That costs money. And generally, your expertise may not be in doing that research. Now, if you have a staff that's doing international, they absolutely should be doing that research for you directly. But if you're, if you're a smaller operation and you're doing this on your own, I mean, my best guess is to please just go use those resources, because I know our SBDC and our trade center subscribe to all of that. They have access to all that data and they can use it on your behalf, and they're experienced with using the databases, so that gives them an edge. But you can do a lot of data analysis about where markets are growing and what things are growing and what things are like. So these were a couple of just samples. This is from commercial services, and that there was a good one for Taiwan too, but I just pulled Germany and Italy. And Germany is a mature market, but it still has space for some of the higher end. It is price competitive, but some of the sustainable, generally for Europe, you're going to want the sustainable, you're going to want the all natural, no GMO, you're going to want things that are very hitting all of that green kind of policies. There might still be space. Europe's been in worse shape as a result of the recession. Asia's been better. So Asia's probably the riper opportunity. Taiwan maybe would be the more ripe opportunity, but it depends on your product. If you've got that perfect product that's going to fit that niche, then that's a place that we want to go. I can remember a few years ago at Global, when they were doing market research reports, somebody talking about Italy. And at that point, Italy was a market, but it was still more table food. Docs were still eating a lot of table food. So it looked like it was going to grow, 5 and 10 years ago. It's lately that they think that that's one of the top markets for you to think about in Europe, is that they think there's some space in Italy. So it would be very difficult for you to generate this report on your own. And if you work with one of your government partners, you're going to get access to it pretty immediately. So how do you go in? How do you enter a foreign market? So ideally, you plan it. I think that given that if we were live at Global, I would be expecting people to have business cards. I mean, somebody's walked down the aisle and said, here, that's actually how I first got involved in the pet industry about 15 years ago, as I was working a booth and people were walking up to the booth, and the other people at the booth didn't know why the Israeli people didn't want pork things and why these people didn't want beef things. It was back in the mad cow time. So there's just stuff as you're having these interactions with potential customers that it's helpful if you sort of have a strategy as you go in, okay? But I'm going to show you some different strategies and kind of talk about what's the typical first path. So indirect exporting is somebody walks up to you and they're buying from you, and they're buying from you in the United States. You're delivering it to them, usually at your factory, and then they're consolidating it. So lots of times you'll get people who are buying for the Caribbean and foreign markets, and you're shipping it to Miami to this consolidator that they have, and then they are the exporter of record that's leaving the country. And that's a nice additional sale for you, I suppose. But what it means is you've lost control over your goods. You really don't know where they're going. You don't really have any control over how they're presented or what happens to them in that end market. So it's an advantage in a quick sale. And if you get a good customer that you can supply that way, and you're not really interested in going, significantly having a more global footprint, it might be a path. But typically, direct exporting is probably what most of the companies I would expect to be doing. So they would mostly be doing direct exporting, where they ultimately are supplying the customer in the foreign market. And that customer is potentially, if you're a very small company, it's potentially a retailer. You might get a couple good retailers. You might have some customers that you're serving directly in a foreign market, but probably it's a distributor or maybe a chain that buys at distributor prices. And they're repping your product in that other market. You're making a sale to them, but then you're going to need to support them. So for them to be able to tell your story, for them to be able to promote your brand, for them to be able to service your product, you're going to have to help them to tell your story and know what's best about it and figure out if they're a right fit. And so getting the right distributor, getting the right customer is hard. It's hard here. It's hard everywhere. And so again, using those resources to sort of screen partners and not just necessarily take that one who happened to walk up to you at the show. Sometimes they're wonderful and great and it works out fabulously, but sometimes you go down a rabbit hole and that's not the right partner and you get locked in a contract and then you can't get out of it. And so rather than just randomly reacting to these inquiries that you get, I think it would be very helpful to sit down and have a strategy. Like, we know that we first want to enter this market, and that's what we're going to focus on. And that's where we're going to go first. And if you can start to identify the customers that you would most like to have as customers because you think they best kind of represent you, again, that's the kind of thing you would work with some of these people to identify who those buyers are. With direct foreign investment, you're going to be larger typically before you consider this, but it's not impossible that you would consider it earlier. Direct foreign investment can literally be opening a foreign sales office. Like, you could have a foreign sales office, and so you have an investment in market that is going to service and help that. So that's like, you would have a sales rep in the US, you have a sales rep in the foreign market, and they're calling on the client accounts, which could be retailers, which could be distributors, whatever those are. It could be an agent, so you could just have one person office who's working out of their house, or it could be literally you have a physical space that you're investing in. And it could be that you're opening a plant. I mean, so your foreign investment could go as far as, I am opening a plant and I'm going to actually manufacture this product there. I do grooming services. I'm going to open, my own grooming salons in these foreign markets. So it could be literally that you're owning, the means of production and owning that market yourself directly, or it could be, sort of a service like you would here. You have a sales rep that's servicing those accounts. Joint ventures, there's a foreign partner. And, sometimes that's how people got in China, because that's how they could get in China, was with a joint venture. Brazil is a market that's very difficult to get in. And I know a lot of people in various industries who've tried joint ventures and not necessarily with great success. So as we go through these, there's very little control over product with the first one. You're getting a little bit more control over product as you're going on and how you're repped and all of that, but your costs are going up significantly. And that means your risk is going up. You have a lot more at stake if you go to opening a foreign office, if you go to a joint venture. Licensing, you're allowing somebody else to produce your product and sell it under your name with your brand. So again, you want to be sure that you're going to have control over that. If what you own is the brand, if what you own is that intellectual property, you want to make sure that that's going to be protected in that market. And if control over your brand and your technology is important, then that might not be a route you would want to go. So they're basically producing it, they're doing all the work. You're getting paid a revenue stream off that for licensing it, but they're the ones who are doing it in that market. So you've lost control. And the same thing would kind of be true with franchising. So if you're doing equipment for grooming salons, you could open grooming salons. You could also franchise out grooming salons. You could also sell equipment to people who service grooming salons. There's several different options here, but the licensing and franchising are only going to probably be appropriate in certain circumstances. And it would be really important that you understood the legal protections that you had in those markets. So understanding international patents, understanding trademark and brand protection. We've all faced counterfeit goods. University of Michigan has a whole counterfeiting center that's at their university, and talking about brand protection and how to protect yourself from counterfeit goods. And that's something that you might want to explore and think about. So I've kind of already addressed a lot of finding partners, but basically you got choices. Once you decide that I'm going to go to Italy, I'm going to have to find a person who wants to buy my stuff in Italy. And so it could do it gold key, give the money to the government, let them tell me who my best partners are, see if I find somebody that I like in that process. I could go wholly on my own and do a bunch of research to decide which one I want. I could just randomly see who's got people who know people in Italy that I could talk with. But it's a range of possibilities for how you find your partner. So how do you do it now? Like, how do you do it domestically? It's at some level, it's not that different internationally. You've got language barriers and cultural barriers and things, and some more travel to do. Although with all of this virtual stuff, that barrier has certainly been reduced. So typically you find customers by advertising, and so there's a lot of globalization of your existing website that you could do. If you're going to be a major international manufacturer of some product, you are going to have a website that looks different in different countries and has different languages and different features and even different promotions in those different countries. And so I would really consider you, if that's the stage you are, that you want to be a major world leader in this market and you're a major manufacturer, you're going to need to take a good hard look at your website globalization. And there are resources, again, the SBDCs, all of these people have resources to help you with that, but you need to think about that. And what is the best channel to reach those end markets? Like, what's the best channel? And it's not going to be the same in every market. So trade shows are definitely an option. And as I mentioned, global is typically one of the best opportunities that a company is going to have, to meet international buyers and not leave the country, and if you take advantage, if you're an ag product, of the branded program, you can get some of your money back for attending global, and because it's considered to be an international trade show. So that's one way. And there's trade shows globally. So you can go to global trade shows. You can go, and even better, maybe you go with your state. So your state has an Indiana booth, or your state has a New York booth, and they're repping your products for you, and you're not there, you just sent the stuff. You can also be part of a US pavilion. So just like we have international pavilions at Global, there's US pavilions when you go to other parts of the world, and you can send product and literature and have them promote your brand in that market. Obviously, networking, talking to other people in the industry, going on professional websites, checking out who attended other shows. There's lots of things you can do there. Sales reps, you use sales reps here, so you can have sales reps in other places, or you can take part of your US staff and you can get them to know a lot more about international business, and they can do all of these things and take advantage of these programs for you. So that would be something. And so I just, I have questions out there, but we get leads from the internet, we get leads from other people. So those are all things that could possibly happen. And I guess that all I'm saying is that none of them are wrong. Just overlay some strategy. Just overlay some strategy of which of those leads are you going to pick up on. So one of the things that I always wanted to write for people who attend global is, what do you do with that international business card? Because I've literally stood across the aisle from people and they're talking to buyers. And in one case, it was somebody with some aquarium equipment, and it was electrical. And they were talking to buyers that were from the EU, and it was a new company, and they were not CE marked, and they were absolutely positively going to have to be CE marked to be able to sell to European buyers. And I don't think they even knew that was going to be a problem. And so when you get that international business card, you don't necessarily have to sell them something. You don't have to do business with them. You can make a decision about whether you want to. And so if you're ready to export, then you can say, is this a place that I want to go? And if this is a place that is a priority market for you and it's a lead, then you want to, take those next steps with them. But if it's not, what you do is say, thank you, and we're just not looking to expand in your market at this time. And so, don't ever close a door. That might be the best buyer in that market. That might be. Don't ever close a door. Acknowledge, respond, do what you would do in any other kind of sales situation, but don't let yourself get distracted by something that is not core. You need to keep with your core plan. So if it is a market that you're interested in, you need to know if they're legit. And so an easy way to find out if they're legit is to ask the commercial service people, and they will do some of that for free. So I've had them do that for me, where they tell me somebody, actually I had a buyer one time that was the right buyer, was the perfect buyer for that market. And they're like, I would have introduced you to them. So I found them on my own. It was kind of exciting. So, confirm quickly, whether this is somebody that you want to work with or not. And then you also have to do some compliance things in terms of screening people. So we'll talk about that in a second, but you do need to make sure that if you're going to go down a road of doing business with somebody, that you're complying with any sort of export restrictions. All right, so there are, after I said all the government wants to do to help you, there's a lot of stuff to comply with. So as I said, what the government giveth, they sometimes take it away. And so you do have things that you have to do if you're going to do global business that are compliance, and the paperwork can be quite a headache. So you do need to know in that market you're entering. One of the reasons to go to the free trade ones is that you don't have tariffs, which are going to add to your cost, but value added taxes. So when you're starting to have a negotiation with somebody, you need to know what the end price you can expect to get in that market is, and there just may not be enough room between what you need and what that end price can possibly be that you could handle these value-added taxes or these tariffs. So that might affect, whether you're going to be able to be successful in that market. You can't just look at your distributor list. You have to look at that landed cost, which is going to include the tariffs and value-added taxes. So there are different kinds of things that exporters have to do for compliance. There's more things for importers, but exporters do have a list, especially since 9/11. So people have to be cleared. Just this week, I think 7 Russian officials and somebody else went on this, this list of people that we can't do business with. So there is absolutely positively a list maintained by the federal government of people and entities, many of which are banks, that you cannot do business with. And if you do business with them, you're in violation of the law. You have to clear people and entities that you're doing business off that list, period. And you have the legal responsibility for that. You may be using a freight forward or somebody else to do that, but you have the legal responsibility for that. So know that you have to do that. You also, and I'm more worried about you people who are doing like filters for aquariums, lighting. So it's really surprising how many products are dual use. So dual use, it can have a civilian purpose and it can have a military purpose. So if it's not dual use, then you don't generally have barriers to exporting. But if it is dual use, you might have to have permission depending on the country it's going to, et cetera. So think about that dual use issue. And if you've got filters and you've got things like that, you probably do. And you're going to, again, want to talk to your Small Business Development Center about that. And then you can't bribe, you can't pay for play, you can't do that stuff. So even though it's happening in a foreign market, you have to comply with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now you are allowed to pay like expediting fees. You can pay $25 expediting fee, those kinds of small things that are small bribes. If that's the custom in that country, that's how you get the paperwork done. But you can't pay to get the government contract. And you have all kinds of non-tariff barriers. So particularly if you have, again, a food, a health kind of safety product, there's going to be all kinds of lists of things you have to comply and vet certificates and things. And so that, again, is why it's helpful to have a good partner. So I wanted to wrap up with the loan programs that are specific to export. So most of you would be able to be eligible through the Small Business Administration, but you can also go to Ex-Im Bank. So the SBA has loans for businesses just doing domestic purposes, but they have special loan programs that are for export. So they're only for export. They're funded at a certain level, and the level to which they're utilized is the level to which that money is still available for other people. So basically the government is doing a loan guarantee, and they have particular banks around the country that are good at working with them if your local bank is not interested. And you can use those loans for inventory things, but you can also use those loans for equipment. So if you need to expand, if you need to update your machinery, if you've got goals like that, you can tap into this money if you also have an export component. And in that loan package, you can put in things like the Gold Key program. You can put in things like going to a trade show, so that can be part of what you're doing to sort of expand your exports. So for these particular SBA loans, there are officers across the country, they're regional, that help work with these programs. And I would really encourage you, if you're looking for some funding and you especially need to expand capacity to produce and manufacture products, if you can connect it to expanding exports, that's going to give you that extra bit of funding. Same thing with Ex-Im Bank. Their loans tend to be larger. So they tend to be the, 1 million, 2 million. They're the larger loans. The SBA loans can be a little bit smaller. And SBA can have a little bit more of a domestic component. For Ex-Im, it has to be more than 50% US, or there's a requirement on the US manufacturing on Ex-Im that's a little easier for SBA, since they can also be on domestic business. So, as you're thinking about, we're at this moment in time where things are sort of lulled, we're not doing business as normal. So if you can invest this time to start to begin to explore these markets, to start to begin to think about what you might have to adapt. Do I need new packaging? Can I put this together in a loan package? That might be a really good fit for you to be able to then just really expand your opportunities as we get past this and we get to the next upcycle. So I really want you to be successful. And so if you go and you click on my profile, I will have up for you a number of resources that you can check out. And I'll have the list of prices for commercial services, and I'll try to have some web links for these programs for you. But I did want to just plug some free training. I think you can do 20 webinars for free at tradepassport.org, and it's trade-passport.org. And so any of these topics, we just did a kind of broad overview of market entry, but any of these topics like dual use, like the SBA financing programs, trying to figure out your ideal buyer in a foreign market. So there's more than 60 webinars, and the webinars you can do, and then they link you up with your local SBDCs. So you can, just look at the webinars for free, but if you also are trying to figure out who is a good place and person for me to contact, you can click the links in there and find the resources in your state. that are available to assist you. So thanks very much, and have a great rest of your show.